Hi, this is Tamara from mooglyblog.com, and in this video, I'm going to be teaching you how to filet crochet. Let's get started. Filet crochet is a very simple crochet technique where you have a series of open mesh squares or filled in blocks. Here you can see a small sample of a project that I recently made using filet crochet. I've worked across in rows here, sometimes leaving the block open, or the square open, I should say, and sometimes filling it in, as you can see right here, our blocks and our mesh. We work back and forth in rows otherwise, and you can see here, we've got sort of a grid of open mesh, and here we've got some sections where we've filled in those blocks. By leaving them open or filling them in, we can create all sorts of graphic designs by using just one color of yarn. If you look closely, you can see here, this is all made of double crochets and chains. We have double crochets that form the basic grid section and chains that connect those as we work across. When we fill them in, we fill them in with 2 double crochets. So the basic pattern for the blocks you can see right here is double crochet, chain 2, skip 2 stitches below, whether they're a chain or other stitches as seen here, and then double crochet in the next double crochet. Chain 2, skip 2, double crochet. That's for an open block, or a mesh block, if you will. For our closed blocks, up here, we have double crochet and then 2 double crochets, either worked into that chain space. Some people like to work them into the chains, or if it's on top of a block that was also filled in, you would work those 2 double crochets in those 2 stitches. Then, of course, you've got the one that sorts of closes it off. We've always got to have a last stitch there to finish it off. This particular pattern had closed blocks all the way along the side, as well as a solid row to begin with. Your pattern, of course, may be different. So let's go ahead and take a look at what the actual patterns look like. Now, right here, I have a couple of different filet crochet grids. You can see I kind of used my Sharpie here to fill in the lines, and I didn't do it on this one, but we can use the numbers to help us see where those are. And my computer just doesn't want to print them off enough to show here on camera. But here you can see this would be a representation of that big open mesh. And here we've got a design. When we've got the blocks filled in with black, that is where we work those 2 stitches in between. When it's open like this or like this, that means those are our mesh blocks where we just have the double crochets, chain 2, and skip 2. So if I were to do this written out in crochet symbols, for those who are more familiar with crochet symbols, this will give you a pretty good idea as well. We, of course, always have we need our starting chain, and here's how we figure that. Now, you may encounter filet patterns that use a different stitch count for their blocks, but this one is pretty standard. We want to have our first stitch, we're going to have the interior of our block, and then we need an ending stitch. So for our first little square of our grid, we need 4 chains. Every square of our grid after that, we need 3. The 2 in the middle, and then 1 to finish it up with. 2 in the middle, and then 1 to finish it up with. 2 in the middle, and then 1 to finish it up with. So you can say the number of blocks you want, the X number of blocks, times 3. You need 3 chains per block plus 1. We need that 1 right at the beginning right there. So that is the general mathematical formula. So when you've chained enough to support your work, we're ready to start going up. Now, that last chain represented the base of our first stitch. So you may choose to chain 2 to finish that double crochet, or you may choose to work a double crochet substitute. However you like to do it, what we want to do is make sure to get a double crochet there right in that first stitch. Then we continue to work our way across. We have to refer to our graph. Now, let's say it's this one and we want that first block to be filled in. We're going to work a double crochet in each of those next 2 chains. Then we need to finish off our block by putting in the support, if you will. So this double crochet and this double crochet are the walls, if you will, and the 2 double crochets here are filling it in. So this would be filled in right there. Now let's say we want the next one to be open. We're then going to chain 2 and then double crochet. We still need that final wall, but now we've got a big open space right there, our mesh. We'll do another open one. We chain 2 and double crochet again. So now you can see this would be like the black square in our graph, a filled in square on our project. This would be an open square, an open square. Let's add another filled in one here at the end, right there. So that is what that would look like if we charted out in regular symbols. Now, let's go up another row. Again, you could chain 3 or you can use your double crochet substitute, whatever you like. Now, if this was to be another filled in square, then we would go ahead and work those next 2 double crochets right in the tops of those stitches. And then, of course, we need the final wall. Let's say we need another solid square right here. Well, in this case now, we're going to work those double crochets right into those chains or into that chain space. It's up to you. And then we always need that final little wall to our room. Now, let's say we want to leave this one open again. We're going to chain 2, skip those 2 chains, and double crochet in the stitch after that. And then we'll just finish this one up, we'll say, with another solid block right there. So that is the basic idea. We're going back and forth along with our chart, back and forth. And you can start at either end if it's symmetrical, or you know what I mean, like this, or if it's a graphic, more of an image, you'll need to make sure if you're right-handed to start on that side, if you're left-handed to start on this side. But you can follow it back and forth just with double crochets and chains. So all that said, let's go ahead and jump on in and work on this graph right here together. Now, you can see here, this has 5 blocks, so I needed 5 times 3 plus 1. So that gave us a total of 16, and that's what I've chained right here. So now I need to make a decision. That 16th chain, that last one, is going to be a double crochet, so it either needs to be the base of a double crochet, or I can go ahead and just chain 2 and call that my first double crochet and skip those first 3 chains. Whichever you prefer, it's up to you. Now, this is a solid block, so I'm going to go ahead and work a double crochet in each of my next 2 chains. So there's 1 and 2. And then, whether it's filled in or not, we always need sort of the little walls to that little square, that little room we're building. So we need 1 more. There we go. So the beginning block of each row is essentially going to have 4 stitches. Your first wall, the interior, and the second wall. After that, we've already got our first wall up of each of these little blocks, if you will. So now we go back, we see the next one isn't empty. So we're going to chain 2, skip the next 2 stitches, and double crochet in the one after that. Then we go back to our graph here. We can see the next one is solid. So we're going to double crochet in the next 2 stitches. 1 and 2. And then, of course, we need our little wall that separates our blocks. That's how I tend to think of them. I tend to think of them as little rooms almost, whether they're empty or filled in. So the next one is empty. So then we chain 2. Oop, get that over there. There we go. And we want to skip 2 and double crochet in the stitch after that. Then we can go back to our graph and see we have a filled in square. So we're going to fill in each of those stitches, double crochet in each one across. Now, as I mentioned, you may run into filet patterns that use a slightly different stitch count. They might stick an extra stitch in each room, or maybe they have taller stitches for higher ceilings. You'll want to make sure to read through the notes of the pattern you're making. If you're making up your own, of course, you can do whatever you like. There we go. I had to pull up some more yarn. We've got a stitch in our last stitch, and this is what that first row, there we go, that first row looks like actually crocheted up. We can see our solid blocks and our empty blocks right there. So now we're ready for row 2. So for row 2, we start with an empty block. So again, we need that first wall. So you can chain 3 if that's how you like to start a row of double crochet, Or you can use a chainless starting double crochet like I'm doing right here, or a stacked single crochet. I do have a video for the chainless starting double crochet on my channel if you'd like to check that out. Again, if you prefer to chain 3, that works perfectly fine as well. Whatever we do, we just get a double crochet right there to begin our row. Then, since this is an empty block, we're going to chain 2. We'll skip the next 2 double crochets down there, and then we're going to work in this double crochet. Remember, we need that second wall to our little room to hold the ceiling up. There we go. All right. Now on our chart, the next 3 blocks are all filled in. So that means we are going to need to make a decision. Are we going to work in the chain space or into the individual chains? Now, personally, I'm always a big fan of working into the chain space. It's a whole lot easier and a bit less fiddly. You might prefer the look, though, when you work into the chains. It's totally up to you. For now, I'm just going to go right on into that chain space. We want to fill in our room with 2 double crochets. So there's 1 and 2. There we go. Then, of course, we need our wall to finish up our room. There we go. Now we had 3 of those filled in blocks, so we're just going to keep going. Fill in this next room. 1, 2, and then we need the little wall to hold up that room. We've got 1 more filled in room here, so I'm just going to go right into that chain space now. 1 and 2 double crochets. Oop, split my yarn just a little bit. Let me fix that. There we go. And then we need that final wall as well for that room. All right, now if we go back to our chart, we can see that our last square for that row, for row 2, is open. It's a mesh square. So we're going to go ahead and chain 2, 1, 2, and double crochet in that very last stitch, or the top of the chain 3, however you decided to begin your little swatch. There we go. So now, let me put that down here. Get my hook knot from rolling away. You can see this is what it looks like after row 2. We had open, filled, 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 open, and that's what we've got right here. Open, filled, 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 and open. So you can see how we can start to see that design from our graph showing up in our work. Let's go ahead and take a stab at row number 3. Now, again, we always need our first stitch. So whatever that's going to be, chain 3, chainless starting double crochet, stacked single crochet. The point is to get a double crochet in there first. We of course need our turning chain for our height, but a double crochet substitute there works just as well. So now we've made our first wall, if you will, for row number 3 here, floor number 3 as we build up our building of stitches. So this one's open, so we know we need to chain 2. And then, depending on what was happening below, we would either be skipping 2 chains or skipping 2 stitches. We've got chains, so we skip those. Easy peasy, and work right into that next double crochet. Get that yarn back on there. That one really wants to split on me. There we go. All right, the next block is also empty. Of course, I should probably be following that from the other direction. There. But since it's symmetrical, this one is totally even. We can follow it from either way. If this one had more of an image, we would need to be more careful as we go up and down. So now we're on row 3, which is from either direction, empty, empty, filled, empty, empty. So we've got empty. We need 1 more empty. Chain 2. Skip 2 stitches now and double crochet in the stitch after that. The next block right there is filled, so we go ahead and double crochet in those next 2 stitches. 1, 2, and then don't forget the final little wall there to hold up that room. And then we've got 2 more empty blocks. So we chain 2, we skip the next 2 stitches and double crochet in the stitch after that. Going through this yarn a little faster now. There we go. And then we've got 1 more empty square right there. So again, we chain 2, skip now 2 chains, and double crochet in that very last stitch. Let me find the top of my stitch wanted to wander off there. There we go. So I'm not using stitch markers in this particular video, but I do actually recommend you use stitch markers in your first and last stitch, especially if you're using a stitch substitute or for that matter, the chain 3. It'll just help make it a little bit easier to come back and find the top of your stitch, which you saw me just struggle with right there. So now let me put this down here, and you can see we have finished row 3. And we're getting the same look here on our crochet that we had on our chart. So let's go ahead and finish it up with rows 4 and 5. Now row 4 is just like row 2, but of course it's easiest just to go ahead and follow the chart. So again, I'm going to start with my double crochet in the first stitch, and I think this time I'm going to go ahead and grab a stitch marker and follow my own good advice here. Make it a little easier when I come back for row 5. There we go. And then again, we can glance down and see that first block is open. So we're going to chain 2, skip 2, and double crochet in the double crochet after that. We'll always have a double crochet there waiting to anchor in this new row that we're working on. The next 3 blocks, of course, I'll get filled in. So now we've got a chain 2 space there. We just go right in that chain 2 space, or again, you can go into those chains if you prefer. We need 2 stitches in there, and then a double crochet in the stitch after that. Then we need to pull up some more of this yarn. I chose a cotton yarn for today's project since I'm actually filming this in the heat of summer. So running through it pretty quickly here. There we go. All right. Get that all set up for us. So we've started 4. We've got an open block closed. We need 2 more closed and then 1 more open. So that means we double crochet in the next 2 stitches to fill in the room. And then double crochet in the stitch after that to make our wall. And then we need 1 more filled in room. So we double crochet twice in this chain space. And then double crochet again in the stitch after that. Now, if we go back to our chart, we can see that last block is open. So we want to chain 2, skip 2, and double crochet in that last stitch there. There we go. And that was row 4. So now let's go ahead and jump on in to row 5, which is going to be block, mesh, block, mesh, block. So we're going to start with a block or a filled in square or whatever the pattern you're following is calling it. I've noticed several different versions of the term, or different terms used, I should say. Mark the top of this stitch here. There we go. And now, of course, we want to fill this one in. So we have 2 double crochets right in that chain space. And try that again without splitting the yarn. There we go. 1 and 2. And then double crochet in the stitch after that for our second wall. Then this next room is empty. So we chain 2 and skip 2 and double crochet in the stitch after that. Our next block is filled. So now we're going to double crochet in those next 2 stitches to fill it in on our crochet, and then crochet, double crochet in the stitch after that for our second wall. Our next room is empty. So we chain 2, skip 2, and double crochet in the stitch after that. And we end up row 5 and our little square here with a filled in block. So I'm going to double crochet twice in this next chain space. And this time I marked my stitch to make it a whole lot easier for me to put in that final wall for the 5th floor. There we go. So now you can see, here's a sample of the chart worked up. Now, one thing you're going to notice right away is that while my chart here was perfectly square, my little sample here was not. And this is one of the reasons I think you'll see a lot of designers experimenting with taller stitches or different numbers of stitches in between their open or in their open and closed squares, if you will. There's lots of different ways to play with filet crochet, but it is a lot of fun. And as you can see, it's really pretty simple and uses just the basic stitches. And that's how to filet crochet. Remember, we're using just the simplest of stitches. Follow your chart 1 block at a time, and you can create any image you choose. Thanks so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.